Hello, everybody. We're in the green room for DisrupTV. More importantly, we're getting close to 1,500 guests. It's coming soon. I'm here with my amazing co-host, co-founder, Vala Afshar, and of course, our producer, El. We've got three great guests. We're going to ask them where they're coming in from, and of course, what are they talking about today? Very quickly. So, James, we do it in reverse order. James, where are you today, and what are we talking about?
Today, I'm in a very sunny Austin, Texas, and I'm going to be talking about my new book, Super Creativity, Accelerating Innovation in the Age of Artificial Intelligence.
Very, very cool. Elizabeth, what are we talking about? Where are you coming in from?
Hey, everybody. Elizabeth Weingarten. I'm the author of How to Fall in Love with Questions, A New Way to Thrive in Times of Uncertainty. And I'll be talking about what leaders can learn from this book about how to do exactly that, how to lead through and thrive in uncertainty.
Very cool. Seth, what's going on?
Well, Seth Ravin, I'm here to talk about how ERP software is dead. This whole idea AI is going to eat software. We're right in the middle of it, and fascinating discussions.
All right. Well, we've got amazing conversations. We're going to move ahead. El, let's do the count.
All right. 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us on DisrupTV. My name is Vala Afshar. I'm the Chief Evangelist at Salesforce and your co-host for the next hour. We welcome you to follow us on X at DisrupTV Show. Send Ray, myself, our distinguished guests your questions, and we'll do our best to answer them live. It's my pleasure to introduce my co-host, Ray Wang. He's the CEO, founder of Constellation Research. He is the best-selling author of Everybody Wants to Rule the World. I see Ray on TV, I believe every week. It feels like almost every other day. CNBC, Fox Business, Bloomberg, international outlets. He's, in my humble opinion, one of the top futurists to follow on X at RWANG0. Welcome, Mr. Wang, to DisrupTV.
Hey, thanks a lot. I'm here with Vala Afshar, the Chief Digital Evangelist for Salesforce. He's also the author of multiple books, including Boundless and Autonomous. These are #1 sellers on Amazon and the path to the future. Executives around the world pay attention to every one of his inspirational, insightful tweets. And when he's not keynoting, leading events, or seeing him speak at different kind of workshops at Salesforce, you're going to see him on business TV outlets such as Bloomberg, posting insightful analyses on ZDNet, and more importantly, catching his inspirational conversations around the world. But it's not about us. It's always about interesting guests, whether it's CEOs or authors or startup founders or thought leaders. Who do we have to kick it off today, Vala?
We're very privileged to have an extraordinary CEO with us, Seth Ravin, CEO, President, Chairman at Board at Rimini Street. Rimini is a global provider of end-to-end third-party enterprise software support, managed services, and Agentic AI ERP innovation solutions. Seth is a 30-year enterprise software industry veteran who pioneered the independent enterprise software support industry. In 2005, the Enterprise Software Observer named Seth as one of the 25 next-generation leaders of the enterprise software industry. And at the same year, Seth launched Rimini Street with a mission to redefine enterprise software support using innovation, next-generation support services delivered at more than 50% savings in fees compared to software vendors' annual support programs. Prior to his success launching independent maintenance support programs, Seth was an executive at PeopleSoft, where he served most recently as Vice President of Customer Sales Division. Welcome, Seth, to DisrupTV.
Thanks for having me, guys. So look forward to talking to you guys a little bit about what we're doing in changing software and this whole AI is going to eat software world that we're working in today. And of course, affecting the stock market in a big way.
Love that.
Definitely. I mean, we're seeing the impact of AI. We're seeing the impact of each one of the ways. You built Rimini Street by challenging the traditional ERP vendor model. 20 years in, what did the market totally misunderstand about independent third-party support? And more importantly, I want to ask you the question, what is the most valuable thing you should not give up?
Well, you should never give up your autonomy. You should never give up your ability to make decisions about your own infrastructure. If you're running a business, building a business, you must have control. And I think this is one of those things where people didn't understand. When we came up through the world of PeopleSoft and we came up and saw the enterprise software, it was one of the few spaces where there was no real competition. Every other part of the consumer world, there are competition, there are options, you have choices. There were none in the world of big enterprise software. You had to go there to get your maintenance, and we just came in and we decided we would be able to offer an alternative to that.
Can you talk to us about how CFOs think about developing their investment thesis today as compared to perhaps last 5-10 years?
I think things have changed. And Ray, you and I have had numerous conversations over the years as we've watched big ERP, which people thought was how you're going to run these big organizations, break apart. It decomposed into pieces, and now those pieces are finding competitors. And so we live in a different world where I know you guys may, I'm going to date myself, go back to the deck days and when we used to talk about a deck shop or an IBM shop. And the only thing that you bought, if it had an IBM logo on it or a deck logo. So as new technology came out, until it had one of those logos on it, you didn't buy it. And when you bought it, you paid 5 times more than the rest of the market. That world has changed. CFOs are much more comfortable, as are CIOs, in mixing and matching pieces. We're living in a next generation of technology where we more and more have to match pieces together. And so the software vendors, for example, who make these big enterprise software components where they used to have control of the customer, that's all changing. They're losing control because choice is now entering at all different levels.
Wow. So this basically creates a very interesting scenario. Like if you're running a core ERP system, you connect it to a million different things, right? You connect it back to your operational technology, you connect it to your CRM, you connect it to your supply chain systems. What happens when you play this out in 5 years? I mean, does this mean the agentic world changes? Does this change the way ERP looks? Does it change how software looks for you, especially for your customers?
I think this changes the entire enterprise software market. And this whole AI will eat software. Sure, AI is going to change. It's going to allow us to do things faster, better, cheaper, with more agility and a faster speed to market. I mean, the reality, guys, is the only way that a company is going to win in the future is to have the lowest cost to serve. And they must have a good product. They don't have to have a great product, but a good product and the lowest cost and the ability to make a profit and sell against your competitors, you'll kill them because everyone is in a hyper competitive world. And that hyper competitive world now drives on cost. They must lower the cost. And here we are. So many of these software companies made their money. They've got these massive maintenance bills. They've got all of this money they've made because they were able to hold the customer essentially hostage. We're now seeing people rethink the whole way that business is going to be transformed with technology. And I think this is going to change. That's why you're watching the software market. The stocks, nobody knows how to value them because you have someone like Anthropic comes out and puts out a little piece on the legal profession, a little piece of CRM. All of a sudden, right? You guys saw this at Salesforce, right? There's this whole question of, well, how do we value software into the future? How do we value companies? How do we understand what people are going to pay for and develop? Now, we all know, we've been in this business a long time. These systems are huge. They don't just do one thing or have a few fields. It's going to take an awful long time. No one's going to sit there and say, generate my equivalent of Salesforce system and have it spin up all by itself with audit trails. A couple of companies. We have to understand we're moving money, we're moving orders, everything has to be tracked. That's just not going to happen. And so we're going to see how these pieces will come together. But this whole, what you're watching, this disruption is what's playing out in the market right now. People just don't understand how all these pieces come together.
Let's help some of our folks better understand. You've described an agentic AI layer on top of perhaps a traditional ERP system or a stable ERP system. We've watched in the last decade 4 waves of AI innovation, starting with predictive use of AI with machine learning, and then the world kind of woke up in 2022 November to the generative wave, the second wave. And now we're seeing concurrently wave 3 and 4, the agentic and the physical AI, the autonomous vehicles, smart drones, humanoid robots, robots in general, even smart glasses with embedded multimodality, where physical AI can now, you can speak to a glass and have it execute tasks on your behalf. So with agentic, where software now has autonomy and agency to execute tasks in complex workflow on top of ERP. Can you talk to us about what does that mean? What does that mean? At the intro, you mentioned traditional ERP is dead or dying.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us about agentic AI and the superpowers that it can bring to businesses.
Well, I think what you're watching is these, for example, just the ERP are so complex and so big that they cannot be changed quickly. The agility factor and the cost to make changes. For example, the president of the United States woke up one day and said, I don't like the way Brazil is treating their former president. I'm going to put a 50% tariff on the coffee. Okay, every coffee maker suddenly has a 50% tariff they had to deal with the next day in Brazil. Changing an ERP system for that kind of sudden and volatile level of change is very difficult, very expensive, and you can't move fast enough. So we're using things like agentic AI to come on top, and we're doing the work in an AI layer above, and we're doing it faster, better, cheaper. And as we said, with more agility and time to market, then you could change the product itself. So we're using agentic AI. You might call it Band-Aids, you might call it to supplement, but we're able to do things faster. And so you're watching this come into the mix. But I think the other thing, guys, is we're dealing with a very serious problem with labor. Labor is everyone's most expensive component of the business. Labor is a serious problem globally as we look at declining birth rates. We see organizations that if they cannot reduce the amount of labor it takes through automation to run their organization, they literally will not have enough people to run the business in years to come, or government agencies. So there's several imperatives going on that are driving this technology forward. And it's not the AI washing of, hey, everything should be AI. This is the fact that we're really using it in the real world to solve key business problems of cost and labor, time to market, and changes that have to happen faster than we could otherwise make them.
Seth, you're absolutely right. This cost structure thing is impacting everyone. We see 3 things. One is margin compression, and everyone's facing this right now. People are working 10 times harder to stay still. And this is why people are looking at automation and driving that labor costs and that pressure. The second thing is really the scaling is different. If everything is, if we're trying to get more innovation into play, how do you pay for that innovation? and people are trying to find cost savings to pay for that innovation. They're not finding it in all the right places. And then the last piece is really, you can build anything you want, but the question is, what is important to build, right? You have to prioritize very quickly because it's a game of velocity, not speed. So if you're a CEO or CIO and you're in the middle of this pressure, where does continuing with a vendor-driven ERP upgrade stop making sense?
Well, and this is what we're meeting. I mean, this is not just a CIO anymore. This is CFO and COO, because this affects the full operation. So we're involving more executives in the decision process today. And what we're doing is we're coming in and saying, look, first, moving forward with these upgrades and migrations are what the vendor wants. They're not based on an analysis of the client's needs, whether it's a government agency or a private company. It doesn't matter. The whole point is it's a vendor-led program. We're coming in and saying, look, you've got to stop looking at this from what everyone else wants you to do and start focusing on what you need. We have enough tools now to say we can take you in a direction that you want to go that matches your business objectives or your government agency objectives that doesn't necessarily align with the vendors. Now, Ray and Vala, you know, we are in the world of, in this AI model, every single company, when companies are running 100+ enterprise products, every one of them has a new .ai version, right? Or you've got agents to deploy, you've got all sorts of things. Imagine every one of these vendors telling you, you need to move to my new product, my new AI version, you need to deploy my agents. And you're sitting there going, wait a minute, I got to deploy Windows 11 to 27,000 workstations. SAP wants me to do an S4. You know, you guys at Salesforce have agents. You want, all right, I've got ServiceNow wants me to do upgrades. I can't do it all. There's physically not enough people, time, or money to do it all. And so CIOs, for the first time, can no longer just defer to the roadmap because there's too many roadmaps. They now have to make decisions about which ones they're going to follow, which ones they're going to defer, which ones they're going to look at down the road, and how they're going to make all this work. And they're mostly frozen. So many are frozen. They don't know where to go. And that's what we're doing, is helping to lay out a roadmap through this set of minds. Oh, I think you're on mute, Vala. Here you go.
Yeah, so Vala, as you get
So
off.
my final question to you, advice to CEOs who are looking to, you know, keep up with the pace of innovation when it comes to obviously agentic AI and modernize their tech stack and really stay adaptable, which is, I think, a key skill that we all need, given the pace, as Ray mentioned, velocity, speed, and direction of change that we're all experiencing.
Well, I think the word bold and to lead is going to be very important. This is where the difference between CEOs, CFOs, CIOs, COOs is going to change in the future. Everybody's at the table. Everybody has a role, and the CIO can no longer defer to their vendors and say, here's where we're going, we're going to follow this. There's no path that accomplishes everything these guys want to do. Following the old idea of doing upgrades and migrations and thinking that that's modernization or that's going to get you where you want to go is not the case anymore. You must look at what you're going to accomplish. You need to look at what systems and technologies will get you there, but you must be bold. And you must go your own direction. And those who do will find competitive advantage that the other guys will not reach, because they'll be so busy with years of upgrades and migrations, and that they'll be so busy on the vendor's roadmap that they won't get their own done, and they won't be able to compete effectively in a hyper competitive world. So I think it's exciting technology. I think we're going to have so many stories in the future as we start to all learn about how these products and technologies will come together. And I think we're just embarking on a really exciting time Probably, Ray, in Vala, since the time that we wrote the first HTML code, where we're sitting there in 1999 going, what is this sorcery, this HTML, all right? And all of a sudden we went through the cloud and we can't secure it. No, now it's more secure than a computer in your own basement. Now we're in this next generation. This is truly a paradigm shift of technology, and people are still trying to get their hands around it. It will take a while. We will see real use cases, and the use cases is what will wake everybody up, and we're going, oh, I can use it to do that. I can see where it's effective, and I can see where people are just wasting my money with it.
We are moving so fast. This agentic era is here. The AI era is here. This is like the big shift from client server to cloud to AI, but in a very different way. It's at a different scale. We're with Seth Ravin, CEO, President and Chairman of the board at Rimini Street. Thank you so much for being on the show, Seth, and we'll see you around.
My pleasure.
Thanks,
Take
Seth.
care, guys.
That's it's not easy being a CEO in the tech space. So it's we talked at the beginning. Seth mentioned he hasn't written a book. Well, he gets a pass when he's a CEO of a company. But we are fortunate to have amazing authors on our show. Elizabeth Weingarten, author, journalist, applied behavior scientist. Elizabeth is the author of a book we're going to talk about: How to Fall in Love with the Questions. A new way to thrive in times of uncertainty. Elizabeth is a journalist and applied behavioral scientist who works at the intersection of science and storytelling. We all need better storytelling. Ray, you and I are trying to work on this. Elizabeth has worked on editorial staffs of The Atlantic, Slate, Quasar Today, and was managing editor of Behavioral Scientist. Elizabeth's writing has appeared in including The Atlantic, CNN, Financial Times, Harvard Business Review, and Time Magazine. I know something about Time Magazine. I think one of my bosses owns it. Elizabeth has led research programs at the think tank New America and the consulting Ideas 42 and tech companies Torch and Udemy. She's an in-demand speaker and has shared her work and conducted workshops at venues including South by Southwest, United Nations, IMF, and numerous prominent universities around the globe. Welcome, Elizabeth, to DisrupTV.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you.
We're really excited to have you here because you have written a book that is perfect in the age of where we are in technology, which is really about a book about the power of questions. And if we think about the core of AI, it's prompting, it's questions, it's that curiosity. And so when we think about, what are some of the most important ideas that leaders should take away from your book, thinking about the power of questions? Because a lot of times, leaders are like, don't bother me, just execute, do your stuff, right? And here you are challenging the norm, saying something different.
Yeah, well, thank you for the question. And I think I want to talk in depth about AI because that is a part of the book, and that is such a core piece of why I think this is so important right now. But I think on the one hand, leaders today give a lot of kind of lip service to wanting to lead better through uncertainty, right? We all know our world is incredibly uncertain. It's becoming more uncertain. And yet, I think tend to kind of wave away the importance of questions. But I think the big takeaway for leaders is that a lot of us are still leading through uncertainty as if we were in an episode of Severance. I'm not sure how many people have watched the show Severance, but the takeaway there is, that folks in the show think that they can just separate their personal lives from their professional lives. And so what I see a lot in leaders today is that they think they can separate the way that they deal with uncertainty at work from the way that they deal with uncertainty in their personal lives, but we can't. And a big lesson from my book is that the way your relationship to uncertainty is a direct reflection of your relationship to yourself. So if you want to get comfortable with professional uncertainty, you actually have to change the way you relate to personal uncertainty. And so that means how you navigate the big questions of life, right? The questions about relationships, meaning, purpose, love, loss. So how do you do that, right? Well, we're going to, I think, talk about that in a bit, but a big way is through developing a questions practice, getting to know those big questions that are driving your life a little bit better. And by becoming more aware of those big questions in your life, learning how to ask the right questions in your life is really central to developing that better relationship to yourself. You're going to know after that what you need, what matters to you, and how to regulate your own response and emotions so that when you're in those moments of stress and uncertainty at work, you're able to respond intentionally and strategically, right? Instead of then reacting. And I would say the final thing is this is really the difference between being able to act from a place of curiosity versus fear, right? And that can make all the difference in the world if you're a leader who's really trying to make the best decisions and come up with the best solutions in our increasingly chaotic world.
How did you fall in love with questions? Did someone influence you? Was it a sponsor, a mentor, a coach, parents? At what point in your journey did you realize I'm really achieving my goals and my objectives because I have developed the muscle of asking better questions?
Yeah. So I will tell you the maybe unexpected source of my intellectual kind of love of questions. And that was, I was dating people in Washington, D.C. This was in my 20s. And I was having this experience that maybe will be familiar to some of the folks listening in, where I was going on date after date with men in DC, and they would not ask me a single question for the entire
What?
date.
Come
Not a
on.
single question.
Come on.
I know.
that's horrible.
No question.
And it was wild. And I kept having this experience, and I kind of almost would turn it into a game. Like I was like, can I make it through the whole date without them asking a question? And this happened so much. And at first I was really demoralized because I was like, I'm never going to find anybody. What am I doing with my life? And then I think this is where the journalist part of me comes in. I started to get really curious, right? And I was like, is this just a me thing? What's going on? So this led to a whole kind of reporting adventure where I started to try to unpack, what does the intersection of gender and question asking look like? And what is the intersection of identity and question asking? And learned that actually, yes, there is some research suggesting that there are differences in the way that women and men ask questions, both in interpersonal contexts and in professional contexts. But what happened was I started to get really interested in questions and the power of questions in our professional lives and our personal lives to unlock deeper relationships, better solutions at work, more kind of professional success. And so I was doing a lot of reporting on that. But then, Vala, to your question, when did I really fall in love with questions? It really wasn't until the pandemic. And what happened at that time was I was really still curious about questions and the impact in our lives. But I all of a sudden was facing two really big, heavy questions in my life. One, I had recently gotten married and things were very rocky, to say the least. I was carrying this question around with me of, should I get a divorce? Very scary, big question.
Sure.
The other big question I was carrying around with me was, what am I doing with my life? Because I had recently left a job to pursue a creative project, and that project was completely failing. And so all of a sudden, somebody who had done all this reporting and writing on how great questions are, I was facing these big questions in my life. And I have to tell you, I hated these questions. These questions were tormenting me. All I wanted were answers to these questions. I just wanted them to go away. And it was around this time that I read a book called Letters to a Young Poet. I'm not sure if either of you have read this book. Amazing book. Highly recommend people take a look at it. It's a book of correspondence between an aspiring poet by the name of Franz Capus, with Rainier Maria Rilke, who's a poet from early 20th century. And this aspiring poet is writing to Rilke, asking him all types of questions, not only about how to become a poet, but how to live his life. He's 19 years old, right? So he's like full of questions. And Rilke very famously responds to this 19-year-old who's asking him all these questions, not with answers, but with this line that really stuck with me. Rilke encourages him to, quote, love the questions themselves as if they were locked rooms or books written in a foreign tongue. And I'm sitting there, holding these questions of divorce, career, feeling like I've never felt further from loving the questions of my life. And that sparked this whole journey for me of trying to figure out, is this even possible, right? As a journalist and applied behavioral scientist, I'm wondering about the science of how we even do this. What does it mean? What can we learn from across philosophy and science and story and poetry and all these different disciplines? And so that was the moment that I really started to try to understand what the answer to that question could be, and started my own journey to try to love those big, difficult questions of my life.
Wow.
You know, how do you get CEOs to not go for the immediacy of answers and live the questions? Because in this world, you're rewarded for decision velocity. And so the ability to love the question and ponder, I mean, is that more a luxury, or is that more required to be more strategic?
I think it is absolutely the strategic edge in our world today. I think we're in a moment where the pressure is to get faster and faster. It's to rely on fast, easy answers, and information has never been more plentiful, right? But I think the people that are truly wise are the people that are going to be able to strategically slow down, to add friction to their processes. And to me, becoming a great question asker is the way to maintain your agency in our agentic world, right? And we can go into that a little bit more, but I think what I see too is we're in the middle of what I think a lot of us recognize as kind of a concerning trend, what Gartner is actually calling an atrophy of critical thinking. Their latest research actually predicts that by the end of this year, 50% of organizations are going to require AI-free skills assessments just to find people that can think independently. So to me, question asking and being able to do that as a leader, that's the key skill of the future.
You know, we are seeing, and sorry, Vala, just jump in real quick. We are seeing that expertise is a commodity and experience is the rare skill. And it's actually transforming what's happening in the marketplace. Vala, sorry about that. Go for it.
No, really well said. Really well said. And I find myself gravitating more and more towards I don't know if it's the right label, but like synthesizers, people that can connect the dots. So as much as I appreciate deep domain expertise, I find myself more interested when I'm with someone who helps me connect the dots. And I think those folks are really good at asking. You know what they're really good at? They don't settle for the perfect answers to the wrong questions. And when Ray says speed is a currency that really matters to all business leaders, and I can't dispute that, I think you tend to settle for like great thinking, but targeted at the wrong set of questions. So Elizabeth, how do you help leaders learn to ask the right question? And you're like super radically transparent with your answers right away. So it just like self-awareness, confidence, being comfortable. I don't think people are afraid of failure. They're afraid of blame. So do you have to be in an environment where you feel safe enough to ask the right questions, knowing sometimes the right questions could be uncomfortable to ask?
I think you've nailed it. I think one of the opportunities as a leader is you get to create that environment, right? Like you get to decide, I'm going to model this type of behavior. But I think to this question of how do you ask the right questions, I do have a framework for how to think about that. But I think that there are different moments that leaders need to exercise different types of question asking skills. So I'll share this framework that can help you discern, am I asking the right question? But I think it's also about not only am I asking the right question, but am I asking it at the right time, and am I asking it of the right source, right? So there are all sorts of elements that make up this kind of how to think about that. At a basic level, you want to think as a leader about three different parts of a question. So one is your question expansive? And by that, I mean, a lot of us get stuck in this, in the binary question, a question that has a yes or no answer. As a leader, this is kind of a death trap. you want to make sure that the question you're asking is one that, when you think about what are the possible answers, it goes far beyond yes or no, right? How do you make sure that your question is opening up a field of possibilities, a field of solutions? The second key thing to keep in mind is your question serving as an internal GPS? And it's not necessarily that this needs to be your own personal GPS if you're asking a question in your business, but is it a question that is kind of looping you back to the values of your organization, to your values? Is a question that your question versus the question that somebody else wants you to ask, right? And so making sure that it's serving as that internal GPS. The third piece of this is it forward looking? A lot of us ask questions that keep us stuck in the past in kind of patterns of rumination and regret, right? And so we're really thinking about, are we thinking into the future? Are we thinking about moving this forward versus are we stuck in blame or regret of the past? But the other thing that I think a lot of leaders struggle with is sitting in the space of, I don't know. As a leader, you are under tons of pressure to, maybe it's ask the right question, maybe it's deliver an answer when sometimes you don't know what to do. And I talk a little bit in the book and in my Substack about learning from a profession that often has to sit in uncertainty, often has to say, I don't know, and how they do it. And that is physicians. You go to the doctor and you're asking the doctor tons of questions. A lot of times they might not know the answer to your question, but the great doctors are able to guide you through that uncertainty and to really ask questions to not necessarily give you answers, but to have a better sense of what's really going on here. What is the need here that's not being met? And so I think if you're a really great leader, you start to see questions as tools of connection, as tools of understanding, not only as tools to get you to the answer quickly, but tools to help you better understand with the various stakeholders that you're working with, what might be underlying the tension here or the sense of urgency here, and how do we kind of inject a little bit more of a deeper kind of knowledge into that space so that we can eventually get to the right answer or solution.
That's awesome. Is it okay for me to view that as like a compass? I don't know. I listen to you and I'm like, a river without boundaries is a puddle. Maybe the questions just guide us so we have a healthy flow towards something.
Absolutely. I think that's totally right.
Very cool. Very cool.
No, it sounds like we're moving in that direction. But hey, some of the things that you laid out really are the beginnings of what you call a questions practice. What is that? For folks that don't know, I did read the book. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So a questions practice, you can think of it like a yoga practice or a piano practice, right? It's a time to explore and commit to the questions that are guiding your life. And I should say the questions practice isn't just about getting answers. It's really about finding clarity and uncertainty. In the book, I do have a map that leads you through a questions practice. So you can kind of have that guide if you're like, how do I even start? But I found that there are really four elements of a great questions practice from the many people that I interviewed for the book and from the research that I dug into. So the first part is curiosity. And the big idea there is when you're relating to the uncertainty in your life with more curiosity than fear, you're asking questions of your experience that, again, kind of open you up to more possibilities, solutions, and ideas. The second part of the practice is conversation. And so questions are often parts of conversation that we're having with ourselves and other people. And if we let them, these are conversations that can guide us through uncertainty. And in the book, I share lots of practices to help you have better conversations with others and yourself during moments of uncertainty. The third element of a questions practice is community. So modern neuroscience shows us that being connected in community not only reduces stress-inducing cortisol, but it also activates the parts of our brain that indicate we're getting a reward and that we're safe. So the right type of supportive community that you can create and build as a leader really can put you in that optimal state of mind to explore questions. And then the final part that I'll share, and again, I have entire chapters on all of these things in the book, is commitment, and by extension of that, rituals. So we really need to commit to that process of exploring our questions while observing which ones are no longer worthy of our attention, right? And so by connecting us with community and creating more structure around uncertainty, rituals like a questions practice can help us understand when do we hold on to our questions and when do we let them go. So those are the 4 big elements. But again, lots of kind of practical guides in the book for folks that want to build a questions practice of their own.
You know, if you haven't followed her blog, Time Travel for Beginners, a great one. I love the post. Don't bring gifts, bring a question. I think that's actually pretty cool. So we're here with Elizabeth Weingarten, and of course the author, journalist, and applied neuroscientist, How to Fall in Love with Questions. Definitely an important book for those that are actually preparing for the world of AI and actually bringing humanity, bringing humanness, right? What does it mean to be human in an age of AI? Coming back to that. So thanks a lot for being on the show. Please get the book, check it out on Amazon, and hope to have you back soon. So
thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
Thank you. Cheers. I need to start thinking about better questions. Obviously doing a podcast for 10 years, you would think you and I have had.
I know. We got to work on this.
We have another world-class podcaster with us who I'm sure comes up with awesome questions. James Taylor, author of Super Creativity, his new book that came out last year, Accelerating Innovation in the Age of Artificial Intelligence. James is a super in-demand keynote speaker. He may travel as much, maybe even more than you. He's a boardroom advisor, internationally recognized authority on creativity, innovation, and AI. For over 20 years, James has advised C-suite executives, entrepreneurs, educators, governments, business leaders from Silicon Valley to Shanghai on how to design innovative organizations so you can unlock creative potential and build sustainable future. As a host of Super Creativity podcast and multiple global summits, James has interviewed over 750 thought leaders, technologists, authors shaping the future of creativity and technology. His keynotes, workshops, courses have reached audiences in more than 120 countries, offering insight. I only see James at airports on how humans and machines can collaborate and solve complex challenges. James' clients includes global Fortune 500 companies, government policymakers, and leading industry associations. Welcome, James, to DisrupTV.
Well, thank you for having me, I guess. It's a pleasure to have this conversation today.
Thank you, sir.
We're so excited to have you. And I think really when we think about your book, what is super creativity? Is there a quick way to describe it? Because we're asking for it, leaders are looking for it, boards are trying to identify how to do it, governments are trying to figure out how to keep people creative. I mean, it sounds like it's an essence of humanity.
It is, and I loved your guest, what Elizabeth was saying earlier about curiosity. I was speaking in Abu Dhabi last week, and in Arabic they have this word al-fadul, which means your curiosity, your ability to ask questions. And I think curiosity is really the fuel for creativity, and creativity is then the engine of innovation. So when we talk about super creativity, what I'm really talking about here is how we can augment that human creativity that I believe we're all born with, by collaborating more deeply with both other people and artificial intelligence and machines. So it's really about this idea about how humans and machines can work together to kind of elevate you mentioned this word, humanity. And I believe, and we are living in one of the most exciting times just now, because this technology allows us to really hopefully reach some of our deepest human skills and really augment these skills in different ways. So that's my kind of simple concept of this idea of super creativity.
Are we entering the most creative period in human history?
I think we are. I think we are living at an incredible time. I mean, we were just talking about, I think some of us were both in Chicago like 2 days ago together, and Chicago was that time of like the roaring 1920s. The world was recovering after the First World War in Europe, the Spanish flu pandemic. But what we saw then was one of the greatest periods of innovation in science and technology. So cities like New York, Shanghai, Chicago, Cairo, they boomed as they embraced these new technologies. But interestingly, the country that I'm originally from, the UK, stagnated during that time. So the UK never had a roaring 1920s. And that was simply because they weren't willing to adapt to change. And I think what we're going into just now is at the start of a new roaring 20s. And
it's going to be a question. Let's hopefully comes back. The roaring 20s. You were talking about the roaring 20s and how we're entering the next roaring 20s.
Yeah, so we're into this new roaring 20s just now. And to give you an example of this, you had a guest on just talking about agentic AI. So I talk a lot about agentic AI and the potentials for that. And one of just earlier today, I was having a conversation with people that were involved in this movement around the one-person billion-dollar business.
Oh yeah.
So we already saw this with Maltbot, last week. A one-person billion-dollar business. That person built that business in 40 days or wherever the number was. And so now, if you kind of strip it all back, if we are living in this time when, especially with agentic AI and different AI now and robotics, we can execute at scale and talk about that velocity you're talking about. What is our role within this? And I believe our role is to be the creativity, is to generate those ideas. And it's not just me saying this. You go to people like Sam Altman from OpenAI. He talks about creativity being one of the most important skills. World Economic Forum, they just interviewed 1,000 global business leaders, and creative thinking is the number one skill that they believe is going to be increasing most in importance. And that's simply because machines will take away many of the non-creative tasks that we do in our jobs. So if you're an entrepreneur, a builder, an entrepreneur just now, you are living in the start of a golden age. And that's why I kind of really wanted to write this book, because I wanted it to be a book that was a bit of a manifesto, a call to arms for this new way of working.
We're definitely seeing that new wave. So what does it mean for human AI collaboration then in the world and the age of creativity? This is a big piece as we're trying to understand what's humanity's purpose in an age of AI, and more importantly, are companies going to get this right? Do they understand how that mixes in terms of how we interact?
Yeah, so let's go. We'll go to a kind of simple example rather than the enterprise one. Most of the clients I speak to are kind of global, kind of Fortune 500. But let's go to a very simple example that everyone is probably doing today. All three of us, we have to give presentations. We have to give pitches. We have to speak on stages. It's what you do. And probably everyone listening just now, you have to give a pitch, whether it's to your boss or to a prospective client. So let's think about how super creativity relates to that work. For me, for an example, before I ever have to do a discovery call with a prospective client that wants me to speak, I'm using AI tools to analyze the psychometrics of those people, those decision makers that are going to be on that call before I ever get on that call with them. And this is obviously really easy to do today. All I need is 1,000 words you've spoken or you've written, and it basically gives me what we call your psychometric profile. So this tells me, this is how you think. This is how you make decisions. This is what's going to appeal to you. So it might tell me, Vala, you really value practicality. So I'm going to go into that conversation talking about more practical applications. Or Ray, you really value data. You want to go in data. So what's the data that's supporting your argument? Then what I can do is I can overlay, and I was just talking with a client the other day. I was speaking in Atlanta from Siemens. And what they've now done is they've created a digital twin of some of their senior executives. So this means anytime I have to go and give a pitch to my boss or a presentation, maybe Ray, you're the next one. Is this really you, Ray? Maybe what I'm going to do is I'm run my presentation, my pitch through that digital twin first to find out what questions, going back to your previous, what questions that boss is likely to ask. And then I can kind of rework that into my presentation. So that means that when I have that meeting with that person or decision maker, the quality of the conversation is a much higher level. Now, here's an important point. The AI is not writing my presentation or my pitch for me or my keynote in my case, but hopefully it is making me a better presenter of my ideas. So that's a very simple example of human plus machine creative collaboration, how those things work together.
That's awesome. So how does a company like mine, Salesforce is 83,000 employees, how do we, and I'm going to recommend your book to the entire company, and how does a company like mine operationalize super creativity?
So one of the first things I think you have to do is, I used to work in the music industry, and I start the book talking about standing there at the side of the stage, watching as I used to work with members of the Rolling Stones, like multiple Grammy Award winners. And so I'd stand at the side of the stage and I'd watch as my artists performed with a spotlight on them. But the audience can usually only ever see the singer on the stage. They rarely get a chance to see backstage, those 200 people backstage who are just as much a part of making a creative and successful and innovative show as the person with the spotlight on them. Because, the media loves the idea of the lone creative genius, but it's a fiction. Creativity is collaborative. Creativity is a team sport. So let's talk about an enterprise. A really good example, I was just talking the other day with the chief legal counsel from Hewlett Packard Enterprise. And he explained to me something that they're doing about using AI to find those backstage heroes, those hidden figures in your organization, because you really want to ensure that you can capture the creativity of everyone, regardless of their job title. So they have this tool, which they now have, I think it's like 26,000 employees now use this tool. And anytime you have an idea or a project you're working on or something you want to try and solve, you have this idea to easily post, find, and volunteer for ideas and initiatives. There's no red tape, no manager approval required. It's called Idea Matchmaker. And it works like the modern dating apps, like Tinder or Grindr. So, swipe left, swipe right, for ideas that are coming up. So let's say you're a data scientist at Hewlett Packard Enterprise. You have an idea for how potentially data science can be used to improve the sustainability of one of your products or one of your services. The AI recognizes what the ideal combination of team members are required to potentially make that project a success. So it shows it up to different people depending on their psychometrics and how they think, because you want to get a mix of different types of thinkers on your team. But it would also show it up to people, maybe it recognizes that your idea needs someone with a really good finance background or a really good understanding of ESG. So it's going to be more likely to show those ideas up to those people. So this is a way of very quickly building teams around ideas. And in the case of Hewlett Packard Enterprise, what he was telling me, he said they were finding all these hidden figures, these backstage heroes in the organization that they didn't know they had. I mean, he told me about one example of this woman that was in this office somewhere in a remote part of India who was utterly brilliant around this particular idea. And he said, we need to bring you further into this team because you're incredible. So that's where we can use AI. It's not about there will be jobs, tons of jobs will be replaced with AI. But for a lot of my clients and the CEOs I work with, what they're more interested is in the augmentation of the human. If we think about a nurse in a hospital ward, 40% of the time that nurse is spending on that hospital is doing form filling, bureaucratic. What a waste of that. The nurse didn't get into that job. So we want to focus on elevating the human. That's kind of what I'm really passionate about.
That's awesome.
All right. Rapid fire time. 3 books leaders should read about AI and creativity.
So the first one I was just thinking, you asked this question, was Creativity Inc. by Ed Catmull. I think it's a wonderful book. It talks about the chairman of Pixar, where he said, creativity is like chemistry, bringing different people together. So I think that's a really good one about creativity.
Getting the cast of characters right is right. You're true.
Yeah. It's a beautiful book. And the other one I would say, kind of just think about where we're going. We talked about Agentic AI earlier. It's something like Max Tegmark's, I think it's like Life 3.0, I think, or Life 2.0. I can never remember. I think that's a really interesting one as a thought exercise. And then to push yourself even further out, I would actually go to fiction. I would look at people like Ian M. Banks, for example, consider Plebas. This just takes you out into your, I think, Vala was talking about earlier about, people who can see things from the synthesizers. If you look at many Nobel Prize winners, what you find is they're often boundary crossers. They have an expertise in one field, but they're able to pull ideas from other areas. So reading fiction is actually great for that because it gets you to empathize, to step into the mindset of a different species, because we're going to be a multiplanetary species soon. So we have to think about, what does that look like? And creativity is going to be a key part of that.
I know, we're waiting for the big reveal. So
we try to get one CEO per episode on our show. So I know we have a great community of CEOs that have been DisrupTV guests. What's the one thing a CEO should do in the next 90 days to turbocharge maybe their super creativity or their direct reports or their organization? Is there one practical advice just in the next few months that they should consider doing, knowing how busy and how hard it is for CEOs to carve time to do anything other than run their business?
So at CEO level, so much of it is about tone and storytelling and vision and positioning. So I would say the first thing is kind of going back to, I was having a call earlier with a luxury goods luxury products, and this CEO was really talking about how you need to embed creativity, in this case, in the organization. So I think the first thing to do is just do a very simple poll. How many people in your organization consider themselves to be creative or be good creative thinkers? You will probably find that number, especially if it's in the US, will be about 40%. So that you think about that. If we know that creativity is going to be one of the most important skills, yet the majority of our people do not consider themselves to have that skill, that's a problem. So Time Magazine calls it the creativity crisis. Now, here's the good news. And in the book here, I talk about this. I could increase your creativity levels in the space of about 60 minutes. I could teach you a couple of techniques I teach you in the book. I could measure your creativity using something called the Torrance test. You could do a workshop, you could read the book, use some of these things, your creativity levels would increase. So creativity is like a language. It's not just something that we're born with, it's something we can become better at over years, something you can improve with age. So I would say to that CEO, creativity needs to be in the DNA of this organization. And you need to get 100%, as much as possible, of your people understanding that they have creative potential, they are creative, and understanding that this is a skill that they can become better at and they can develop over the course of their lives.
We should devote a 60-second episode where you teach Ray and I and our
teach you one of these techniques.
Yeah.
Actually, I'll teach you one just now. This is really funny because it's not in the book, but your previous guest was talking about questions. Pablo Picasso once said, "Machines are stupid. They only come up with answers." I think Pablo Picasso is wrong, and I think AI is showing that he's definitely wrong. So everyone talks about prompt engineering. A few years ago, when Gen AI was the thing, prompt engineering, but everyone is assuming that the human is prompting the machine, but it should actually also be the other way around. The AI should also constantly be prompting you to think differently, to deal with your cognitive biases as well. That's a great way of building that flexibility of mind, of creativity mind. If you tell your AI, just don't speak to me, just speak to me like a New York cab driver. Challenge my ideas, like really drill into them as well. Don't just assume that what I'm saying is going to be correct.
We had Peter Dannenberg, who's a distinguished engineer at Google, on the Gemini project. And he talked about lessons learned from Aristotle and Socrates. And he said that we're now training models to ask questions and challenge the input prompt source. And so it was rhetoric with Aristotle versus dialectic with Socrates. And we want more pressure testing of engagements and questions versus just spitting out answers.
In the book, I talk about this idea of creative peers, that you have someone. The Germans have you and I, Val, we first met at an airport in Germany somewhere.
That's right.
And the Germans have an expression for it. They say, you want to have someone to steal horses with, which means you want to have someone that's crazy enough that if you take them an idea, they go, yes, and they push you and you make your idea better. AI at its best has the potential to do that, to be that creative pairing, to push your ideas even further. You could have gone on your own as a human.
And I just saw Joni Ive talk about like true innovation and birth of disruptive thinking comes from ignoring reason sometimes. And also rejecting experienced folks above you that may not see your vision. Yeah. And so they dismiss it. And he said one thing he had in terms of autonomy working for Jobs was he had the opportunity to dismiss logic and reason and ignore even authority because Jobs had given him the license to look. If you have a gut feel that this is something important, go for it.
Sounds like a tell-all book, you know. Yeah. I don't know what's going on.
Creative abrasion. Creative abrasion. It's a great technique.
Right. Creative abrasion. I love that.
I think it's a tell-all conversation there. Read between the lines there. So, well, let's all go steal horses together with James Taylor, author of Super Creativity, Accelerating Innovation in the Age of AI. You get his book on Amazon, but more importantly, catch him live. You're speaking in Austin next week. You get the book.
He's everywhere. Catch him in an airport.
Everywhere. He's
Keep
everywhere.
an eye on him. Catch him on
Omnipresent James Taylor. So thanks a lot for being on the show.
Thanks so much, guys. Thank you.
Thanks. Cheers. He's great.
It's awesome, man. I can't wait to meet him in person. I gotta leave him my number. So
He works with the biggest, fastest growing companies, with executives, boards, and super generous with his time and knowledge, and just positive energy all around. I can say that about all our guests. Next week, we have Brian Doyle, CEO of Holden Advisors. We have Rebecca Hines, Dr. Rebecca Hines, founder of the Work Innovation Lab at Asana and the Work AI Institute at Glean, and author of Your Best Meeting Ever. 7 principles of designing meetings that get things done. We can all use that. We also have Igor Rybinkai, venture capitalist and author of Unicorn Focus, the key to building billion-dollar startups in the age of AI. Wow. Have good meetings, build billion-dollar companies, and have another CEO on the show to kick off our well-rounded community.
Does that take us to $14.99? Oh my God, one more.
After next week, we're going to be one shy of 1,500. If you can squeeze a 4th guest next week, we'll get to 1,500. No, but these are 3 heavy hitters, so I wouldn't want to.
Heavy hitters. We don't take away the time.
With the 4th. Ray, you want to summarize today's show in 30 seconds? Although it's 3 o'clock.
Impossible to summarize, but we will do it. Agentic AI is changing the way European software landscapes look like. And of course, we're going to see brand new types of models emerge as cost structures come down. We spent a little time with Elizabeth Weingarten, and I think it's questions, right? We're in a world of asking questions, but we need time to think. We need time to strategically lay out that mind map and see what's happening. And of course, thinking about how to accelerate innovation. This is a very, very different way to think about super creativity. We're going to need more of it as we go forward. And I think organizations aren't prepared, and having the culture to be able to ask the right questions, the ability to figure out how to build that creativity, genius inside organizations, that's going to be one of the differentiators between companies that win and lose. So back to you.
That was you're ridiculous. All right. Well, you saw Ray GPT 10.0. If it's Friday, it's DisrupTV. Thank you for joining us. And we look forward to spending time with you next week. Bye, everyone.
Yeah, we'll see speakers in the green room. Take care.
Bye.